Hi guys, so for my first question, I have 1.1. So to talk about the practices and values of how they have their foundation in the social and intellectual context of mid-19th century. So we learned that there are a ton of theorists and scientists that came from Germany and France and some other European countries, um, as well as in America. But basically, they needed to figure out a way to solidify um, their discipline and their expertise. So they wanted to change to the way they thought about medicine and how it was true was changed from empirical evidence um, to thinking more about the patients and the whole self. Sorry, my dog's being real goofy. Um, so in France, they talked about how the French clinical method, they told the physicians and the clinicians exactly what to do to get the required results. So, for instance, this patient has such and such problem, give them such and such treatment, and they will feel such and such way. So, it made everything very simple, and in a way, we kind of learned that in school, at least for occupational therapy. So, if this person has carpal tunnel, here are do X, Y, and Z, but we also are taught that each individual is different and the treatments are going to require, and you can't expect the treatment to work for every individual. Um, it's kind of a way that they were being evidence based. They know this works for that diagnosis. But they forgot kind of about the person and the root of the disease, which was a problem in their theory. So then Germany focused on experimental study of biological organisms rather than speculative philosophy. I feel like so much of science is the struggle between facts and then philosophy, and I feel like we're getting better and better at understanding the differences and how the similarities and how to move them all together. But I think it's still a struggle that some people have. So they were strictly like science. They relied on the lab for their advanced medical knowledge. Um, but the German university, they were kind of more flexible and experimental and free thought. So um, they started to grow and change. After the Civil War, many American physicians went abroad to increase their skills, and they chose Germany to study. So starting in the 1870s, we saw curriculum changes in American medical schools to emphasize learning science in the lab. And then they place science and medical education and in practice firmly entrenched basic sciences taught at the beginning of medical education. So it's like, this is the basis for all medical knowledge. Sorry, that was a long answer. So question 1.5, the 17th century paradigm evolved into the dominant system of thought and propelled future medical scientists and physicians to act as objective observers, striving to eliminate subjective features of their practices. So this was the European Enlightenment, also known as the Age of Reason. It was based on empirical observation, material mechanisms, reductionism, determinism, and dualism. So they had this huge impact on the practice of science and on beliefs and values about what should be the proper domain of medical thinking and practice. It's like reason is the only reason, or reason is the ruler of human life. There were a couple individuals, three that kind of seemed the most important to me was Francis Bacon. He was inductive, this method of discovering truth, empirical observation, and analysis of data and evidence, having hypotheses and verifying them. He thought that would be a way to figure out all the answers and master nature and figure out a way to make that benefit for him. So Rene Descartes argued that reality existed in two separate and independent realms, mind and body, a metaphor of a machine to describe the body as a series of anatomical parts that functioned without the notion of the human mind, two different ways of knowing, subjective awareness and direct observation. So at least that this person kind of acknowledged that there was the mind aspect of the person, but they still had it so separate that they weren't together. And then Newton was the body as a machine, in which the whole was merely the sum of the parts, contributed to growing interest in scientific methods. So we've seen a lot of change since then, but a lot of our medicine is still based on this age of enlightenment, these kind of big ideas. The one other thing I wanted to talk about with that question is this kind of became the biomedical model, and that disease is the result of like a harmful agent or thing impacting the person to produce the disease, and that the person is all made up of parts. So you have lung cancer, there's a harmful agent acting on this person to produce a disease, and that disease is just in their lung, which is a part of the person. So 2.1, I'll try to wrap it up here. This one's a little shorter. Stories are a universal way of giving meaning to experience. So if you think about it, our life is a story. If you look at an experience like they had family dinner, but you don't understand the whole story, like it was every Sunday night, it was their sister came in from out of town. There's a lot of ways we could think about this question, but it's the primary way in which we understand ourselves in the world we inhabit, and a primary means of influencing others. Once heard, a story initiates for the listener a search for possible meanings. Stories are dynamic and evolve as people tell them and as they are listened to, and people's stories represent reality and portray trustworthy knowledge. From these questions, kind of going back to the first chapter, I think that it's interesting seeing how medicine still struggles a little bit with understanding that it's not all science. In occupational therapy for a long time, it was this medical model, and then it switched. And I think we're slowly seeing a shift a little bit back, but that's just because we're trying to become evidence-based practitioners and really prove what we're doing, why we're doing it. So hopefully, once we develop a solid basis of evidence and research for our practice, then we can head back to, we've never really lost that person-centered, client-centered care, understanding the person as a whole. That's taught heavily in our program, but it is interesting seeing a little bit more of the evidence-based kind of empirical ideas coming back into the practice.